Let's talk about everybody's favorite thing in Notion, and I know it's your favorite because it's my favorite, and that's permissions. They're so amazing, right? Just who can see what, who cannot see what. The power that you have in your hands is pretty incredible, right? Well, truthfully, I think a lot of people don't quite actually understand permissions, and it's really not that complicated, but it can feel a little intimidating and a little confusing. It's actually really critical for especially companies to get permissions right, and it's unfortunately very common for people to not get it right. And I've seen a lot of bad things happen because people didn't understand permissions. And so this is my attempt to give you a crash course into permissions. I'm not going to get so deep into strategy about how to deploy it for, different use cases, but by the end of this video, you'll know everything about permissions you need to know to have a really strong understanding of how they work, and it'll get you going on understanding it. And really, it's not too hard to figure it out yourself once you understand the fundamentals. And that's what this video is meant to be. So this is Notion Permissions 101, and I hope you enjoy, because man, what an amazing subject to talk about. I mean, I know you're going to watch this till the very end, and you're just going to be asking for more. So I'll see you at the end of the video, and we'll talk about that then. Also, like and subscribe. I promise other content is more interesting than this, but I'm not saying that this isn't interesting either. It's just for a certain kind of person. All right, see ya. Okay, we're talking about Notion Permissions 101. Let me stress the 101. I'm going to try my hardest not to get too into the weeds with this, because this can get kind of crazy, and there's different ways of deploying and implementing permissions based on the company and all that stuff, or if you're a small team. Really, this is only going to apply to those who have more than one person in their workspace. So you probably have a team, multiple people, contractors, things like that. But especially with larger companies, this can turn into quite the challenge, I'll say. So let's start with the 101s. This is maybe for people who are not as familiar with permissions, but want to learn. Maybe you're in a workspace with multiple people and you're realizing you kind of need a better grasp on how permissions work. Let's get you started. Let's get you some of the fundamentals and the language so that you can go from there and then start to think about some of the more complex ways of using permissions. So one way that I really love to think about it, and this was not my idea, this was definitely from Ben Borrowski from Notion Mastery, broke up permissions by actors and areas, and I love this. So definitely go check out Ben Borrowski, follow him on Twitter, find his blog and website, Notion Mastery. But basically, when it comes to permissions, you really have to think about permissions in terms of two groups, actors and areas. And actors are made up of people. Guests are the only exception to this. You can't add guests to groups. You can't add them to Teamspaces. They're restricted on purpose. Otherwise, you need to pay for a member. But really, we're talking about accounts, those email accounts that are logged into Notion. And that's what we mean by people. And then groups. There are groups that you can utilize in your workspace to make permission handling a lot easier and a lot smoother, and frankly, help you prevent people from getting somewhere on accident that they weren't supposed to. So definitely want to introduce you to groups. And then the areas of access that you want to think about are pages, databases, and Teamspaces. You're going to manage a lot of this stuff from the settings and members, and then going to groups or the members. So this is where you'll see all of your members. You'll be able to see some of the Teamspaces that they belong to, their access level, and then we also have groups. So we're going to show a lot of this from a Teamspace that I have set up called Lunar Team. It's just a test team. There's nothing in it, but we'll access a lot of what we need to see from this Teamspace settings menu right here. When you add somebody to your workspace and you want to share a page with them, I think one of the biggest problems is that the easiest way to give somebody access immediately to a page is not the right way of doing it most of the time. So a lot of times people come up to the share menu and then they share this with the person and give them access to the page, and then they call it that. And that solves it in a really simple way. It's definitely the path of least resistance, but what that does is that puts it under the shared section for each person or for a particular person, but you're not really giving them access based on like the role, or you're not setting up your Teamspaces in a way that actually reflects what they should have access to, and it makes it a lot easier. But I will say that the share menu is always the single source of truth for who can see this particular page. So if you're trying to find out, does this person have access to this page? You can always check this. This is always your last line of defense. But you definitely want to keep in mind one of these concepts we'll talk about in a second, permissions cascade. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. Let's talk about people and groups. Let's take the bad example for just to showcase what this means when I say you can add people to groups. I can add Brian to this page and invite him, and he'll have access to this page, just this page. But let's say I have like 10 people or 30 people or 500 people that need access to this page. That is an insane idea to think that you're going to share this individually with all those people. In fact, you probably shouldn't even be doing it from this menu, but instead of adding each person individually, what we can do is group those people. So we go to settings and members, and then we go to groups, and we can create a group, new group, and then we can add people to this group. So a common example of this would be creating a group for a team. In fact, the way we build, we actually create a group for all employees, and any new employee who joins the workspace, we just automatically add them to that group. And because that group already has access to all these different spaces in the workspace, and we've figured out the right strategy, I don't have to go and add them to all those places. I add them to one group, and all of a sudden they have access to everywhere they would need as a standard employee. And then we expand their access by giving them access to a team group or things like that. So we create this group, and then we can add members here. And so I could add Brian to this group. Let's say I add Brian and Notion State and Ava and me, and I add them as members of this group. So now I can take this new group and share it with the new group and give them access. And I can even adjust their access right here. Let's say can comment only, and I invite them. Now, instead of having to invite every single person individually, I've just given them access with the group right here. Makes it a lot easier, and I think a little safer too in the long run once you get this set up right. So again, I'm going to try to avoid some of the deeper strategies and just give you a 101. So that's people in groups. You can add groups to Teamspaces as well, not just page. There's some limitations there. You can also add people to the Teamspace, of course. So when we talk about areas, we're talking about pages, databases, and Teamspaces. These are areas that require some sort of access level to access it. So right now we're looking at a page. And then in a database, we can also give access on the database. And technically a database is a page, but a database is interesting because it has its own specific access level just for a database that we'll cover in a second. And then Teamspaces, you can add access at the Teamspace level. So I just showed you the page level. Let's go over to the Lunar team, Teamspace settings, and I can give access in a couple different ways to the Teamspace. And I can do it by giving them access as a Teamspace member or a Teamspace owner. I like to think of those as channels of access, those two, a member and an owner, and you can allow different levels of access per channel. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's say I want to add that group, the new group, as a member of this Teamspace, which I just did. So now you can see new group, Teamspace member. It's comprised of 4 members. So now all of these 4 members are Teamspace members. What does Teamspace member mean? Well, it depends on each Teamspace. In this one, every Teamspace member has full access, and Teamspace owners will always have full access. You can't limit that. One of the limitations is that you cannot add groups as Teamspace owners. So try to keep up with me here. And then even on business and enterprise level, if you don't have one of those plans, you're only limited to members and owners or just everyone else. But when you have business or enterprise plans, you can do custom permissions. And so down here at this group level, I can go custom permission and then change the access level at the group level. Instead of assigning them to the member or the owner group, I can actually give each group or each person in this member list I can give them a custom role. So a lot more flexibility when you get to that point, which is really nice, especially when you're trying to give full access, because you can't give groups this owner access. This Teamspace has its own level of access as well. There are Teamspace settings. So I think that might be the next thing we're going to talk about. Let's talk about that in a second. We're going to talk about default, open, closed, and private. Let's talk about levels of page access. So we've seen the full access, can edit, can comment, can view, and we can see that right here. So basically, it's pretty self-explanatory, but if you have can view, that just means that the person can only see it. If they have can comment, they can leave comments. So I can leave a comment here. Hello. And now I can see comments here if I have that level of access. We also have can edit, which can edit means I can actually, type or delete or add any of the formatting things I have, like these headers and all that stuff. And then finally we have full access. Full access is the ability to not only edit, but share with others. So you've seen me add people and groups to this page. That's because I have full access to this page. Nobody else would be able to do that unless they also had full access to this page. If they had can edit, they would not be able to do that. Okay, so the final level, which is kind of this in-between level, is at the database level. So if we make a table, so now let's open up this page. Up here in the share menu, we'll have one more option called can edit content. This is a really unique one, and it's actually a really useful access level. Unfortunately, it's not the easiest one to apply to a bunch of databases at once. You essentially have to come into each one and change it to can edit content if that's the one you want. Because can edit is one step too high and can comment is one step too low. And since pages do not have this level, there's no way to cascade that permission. I'll talk about cascading permissions in a second as well. So this can edit content essentially means that the people who have that access level can change the pages within the database. They can change the property values here. Essentially, think of this as like giving them access to these pages within the database. You can change the properties, you can change the content, you can add and delete pages within here. But what it's not letting you do is actually edit the database itself. And that means not being able to delete this property or add another property, things like that, or change the layout, which is a good access level, because a lot of times people don't understand that they're actually breaking a lot. They think they're changing the view for them by maybe, hiding or even deleting properties. But what they're really doing is changing it for everybody. So that can edit content is a really good access level. Unfortunately, like I said, it's a little trickier to manage, and maybe I'll include some best practices in a future video. But that is the levels of page access and the different ways that people can have access to content. So if access matters, or if there's a lot of people and they're breaking things and it's really kind of a hassle to try and wrangle that in, it may be good to get a good grasp of this and understand how this works. Let me skip ahead to permissions cascade, because I think instead of going to each page and limiting or expanding permissions at the page level is not the best way to do it. What I mean by permissions cascade is that a page will inherit the permissions of its parent page. So what do I mean? Well, on this page, I've given the new group can comment access here, and I gave them that at this page level. Now at the subpage level, let's get rid of this, even though it probably applies. Let's just make a blank page. This is a subpage. Going back, you can see right here, this is a subpage of this Notion Permissions 101 page. And if I go to the share menu, you'll see that this new group does have access because the permission cascaded. So any child page will inherit the permissions of the parent page. You are able to manually override it. And so I can come here and go to can view, which is restricting the access. And so now if somebody comes to this one, they'll have less access than what was naturally going to be given to them. So you do have those options, you just have to manually override it. And you can also expand it as well. and you'll see page access is different from that page. And then if I go back, it goes away. If I restrict it, you'll see access restricted, and it also shows up right here, restricted. So this is letting you know this has been manually overridden for a reason. Let's go ahead and restore that. That's what we mean by cascading permissions. That's really important because a lot of times people will put important information in subpages, not realizing that by changing the access level at the parent page level, they're actually giving or taking away access that they didn't mean to. I've actually seen people accidentally show all of their medical records because they didn't understand this. And so they were sharing kind of a travel page with people. They wanted them to see, some notes about traveling. And when the person went back through the breadcrumbs, they were able to access their entire HQ, and it had medical records and passport information, really stuff that you don't want other people to have access to unless they're like a travel planner. So be mindful of that because it's very easy to get lost in this. But when you set up your workspace in a good way, it can be a lot more easily managed. Okay, so that's page access. We covered permissions cascade. Let's talk about the levels of Teamspace Access, and it has something to do with permissions cascade because you can think of a Teamspace almost as like the parent page to all of the sidebar pages beneath it. So this Teamspace setting, whatever I give somebody access to at the Teamspace level, they will also cascade that permission to the pages beneath it, like this Lunar page right here. So I gave the team access right here, Teamspace settings, new group. I made them members, and the members have full access. That means that this page, Lunar HQ, has people at the Lunar team right here, Teamspace members have full access. So we can't see the people in particular that have access here. All we know is that Teamspace members have full access, and I can change that here as well. So who are the Teamspace members? Well, that means that I have to go over to the Teamspace settings and then check Teamspace members have full access. Who are the Teamspace members? Test group and new group, which I think are just the same people. That means that just like this subpage, those permissions are going to cascade. So we can think of it as like a parent page, and whatever you set there will cascade down into the pages below. So now we can talk about the Teamspace access levels at the Teamspace level. So what does it mean when it's default, open, closed, or private? Let's start with the top, default. Everyone at Notion State must be a member. That word is the key word right there, must. And every workspace that has Teamspaces enabled, which is probably all of them by this point, if you have Teamspaces, you have to have one Teamspace at least set to default. You can have more, but you have to have at least one so that every member at least has one place they can go and see pages and things like that. So if it's default, everyone has to join. This is really important when you're working with external contractors or clients. A lot of times you might not realize that you have some Teamspaces set as default. You think you're not giving them access, but you're really you're forced to give them access to this Teamspace. So we actually like to make a Teamspace that's just kind of a welcome Teamspace, a hello Teamspace. It's almost like the company lobby where you can kind of intermingle public people coming in from outside with the employees, and you're not really hurting anything. So that's what this welcome page is. And it's not really hurting anything having it, and it's our one default Teamspace. The other ones we then manage like our data. We don't want external contractors to have access to this. And then open means that anyone can see and join this Teamspace. So when we look at the Teamspace bar right here, we can browse Teamspaces. So these are showing up on my sidebar because I'm a member of these Teamspaces. That doesn't mean that that's all the Teamspaces available. I just happen to be a member of all of them. But if there's another Teamspace that I'm not a member of, I could browse and see all of the different Teamspaces. So if it's set to open, that means that I can see the Teamspace and I can also just join it without having to ask anybody. It's just open, it's available. It's not going to take up my sidebar unless I want it to take up my sidebar. So that allows you to kind of just join some of those more basic Teamspaces, but have the choice. rather than default being forced to. When we talk about closed, it means that anyone can see the Teamspace, but they cannot automatically join. They have to request access, and a Teamspace owner will be able to accept or deny them access. So it looks the same as the open one, but you'll have to request access to that one or be invited to join that Teamspace. You'll still be able to see the name of the Teamspace and I believe even the pages within that Teamspace and their titles, but you won't be able to open those pages and see any of the content in them. So keep that in mind if you are planning a secret party and you make it closed. If you title the Teamspace secret birthday party, someone will still be able to see secret birthday party. And then the last one is private. This one means that only members of the Teamspace can see that it even exists. So you have to be invited to even see it or know that it's there. You won't be able to see it in that Browse Teamspaces bar that I just showed you. And this one is only available for business and enterprise plans. Otherwise you won't have access to this. Private Teamspaces are available for business and enterprise, but the custom permissions for the Teamspaces are only available for enterprise. All right, let's finish off with some concepts and then final thoughts. We've already kind of covered permissions cascade. The other thing is most access wins. So if I have access to this page via different methods, over here in the share menu bar, let's see, I have new group, which has canned comment access. I am a member of that group, but I also have full access just because I made this page and I automatically am gonna have full access. What matters is that the most access wins. So whichever channel of permissions, there could be 10 different groups that give me different permissions via different trees. What matters is whichever one that gives me the most access. So this one, I have full access, and so that's why I'm able to actually edit this page, not just be restricted to comments only. So most access wins, and again, your final source of truth on a page basis for finding out who has access is the share menu, but that's not the best way of giving access at scale. The final thought that I've had, especially dealing with workspaces at scale for businesses and managing, 30 teams and databases and all these different Teamspaces per team, when we're trying to troubleshoot, sometimes they won't have access, and we're trying to we have to trace back the path to find out how they have access and why they have access, and maybe somebody restricted it and they didn't mean to. We have to kind of troubleshoot the line and find out where it's broken. And it'd be great to see what they see, because for us, we'll be able to see, we're the Notion architects, we usually can see everything. And so we might be able to see the database, but they cannot see it. And we don't exactly know what they're seeing. We have to ask them, we have to communicate, we have to screen share. And so it'd be great to be able to, as an administrator, see what a user X sees. Maybe it's see as the particular user, or maybe it's see as this group or something like that. It'd be great for the more enterprise level use cases to be able to have a little better access. And then last final thought, subscribe. If you made it this far into this video, this is such a nerdy topic in Notion, you should definitely subscribe. I think I'm gonna have some useful things for you. And we're putting out videos weekly, so we'd love to have you subscribed, and would love to hear your comments. So please leave a comment, ask any questions. I'll be sure to get back to you. I knew I'd see you at the end of this video, and I know you're asking for more content on permissions. We're just gonna have to cut it off there, but I promise we'll have some more deep dive content on this in the future. If you are trying to figure out permissions for your company or your workspace and you need some help, that is something that we actually do as a business, and you can find us over at notionstate.com, and we can talk about how to get you set up correctly so that people see the right things and people love what they do and they're not worried about getting all their data out there for everyone to see. No one wants to see that, right? Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video.